I think the message here is just being compassionate towards wherever you're at, seeking out early intervention in the same way that we would treat our horses.
This episode is brought to you by the Horse Trust and Flutterby Jewellery.
Hello, happy Wednesday.
Hello, how are you doing?
Good, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good actually. I've had a good week. Life is...
Give us the update.
Yeah, life is being kind. And actually, the conversation that we're going to have today, I'm really, really looking forward to, because we are going to be talking to, as you've seen from the title, Maisie Hill, who is a female hormone specialist. And one of the reasons why I'm feeling good this week is because I think I'm in a good hormone place. And that's really cool, because my hormones have been so not good. And I found out I'm low estrogen and all sorts of different things. But anyway, I'm taking supplements and I'm doing the things that I need to be doing. But it's really interesting because the impact that part of my hormone cycle has on my mental health is so extraordinary that it's taken a long time for me to know that it was that, as in to track it enough that I understood. But yeah, it's life-changing. I actually said to my partner yesterday, I said, I actually feel like I'm just like having a nice time at the moment. And he was like, I'm really pleased to hear that. I'm sorry it's been really hard. But like, genuinely, like, I actually feel excited about things. I feel hopeful about things. Hard things don't feel so hard. And like, there are times where like the smallest hard thing, I'm like, and I don't mean like I'm inconvenienced. I mean like, I have really negative thoughts. I feel really hopeless. I don't feel like there's a positive outcome that's even possible. And then I ruminate on it. So it's not like I'm just being like dramatic. Like, I'm genuinely affected. And so, yeah, things are good. And I'm having nice experiences with my horses. We're doing some in-hand hacking, like you, but for a different reason.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, it's good for the confidence bucket, of course. But we are doing it for foot rehabilitation. Fun. So Tom Broadbridge, the farrier, came and visited, and some of the things that he commented on was a few of the horses, like Zora, for example, doesn't have a particularly like good hoof conformation. And so he suggested that we trim her differently and then walk her on tarmac to stimulate the frog and the foot.
As if you were like transitioning her for the first time, because that's what they say, isn't it? If you're going barefoot to walk on tarmac and things. Yeah.
Exactly. And what Tom was saying is, if a horse is sensitive on tarmac with no stony bits, post the initial transition, you're not dealing with sensitivity, you're dealing with lameness.
Oh, gosh.
Hot take. But on flat tarmac, I'm talking about, not stony ground. Like, stony ground is a different kettle of fish. But it's kind of like, if actually the reality is, if you or I were to walk down the street, the flat road tarmac with totally bare feet, we actually probably could do that quite comfortably. But if we had something going on elsewhere, we maybe would find that difficult. And that's actually not that different for... Sorry, there's a car alarm outside and I wondered if it was my car suddenly. That's not that different for the horses. So it's super interesting. And like, I'm taking pictures, I'm being a scientist about it, I'm like actually watching, and it's really, really interesting. And I did some with Zora, and then we have another horse called B who has got quite compromised foot conformation. And it's lovely and a really lovely thing to do. And I said to Lucy, because we were going out in pairs, I went out a bit on my own and I've been doing stuff together. And I said to Lucy, I was like, this is nice, isn't it? It feels really, and she said, therapeutic. And I thought, yeah, you're absolutely right. Going out and like walking next to a horse, I think is one of the most important things we can learn to do as horse owners, is learning being okay with walking next to them, like not needing to ride them for any kind of, like, that shouldn't be the thing that validates the relationship.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just a lovely thing to do. I nearly, this is funny actually, I have this flag right? It's like a whip with a flag on it. It's called Visi Whip. I think they're amazing, right? They're a brand, and it says 10 miles an hour on it.
Right.
And it's high vis.
So you can like hold it out.
Yeah. Well, you can also wave it quite violently if you need to. This lady's face, this woman's face. She was coming towards me too fast. So I have the stick out and I'm like, please slow down. She doesn't. So I just violently start waving it up and down. I started slowly waving it up and down. Nothing. So I waved it up and down really fast. And she didn't really slow down still. She just kind of drove past looking absolutely terrified. And I was like, well, you know, maybe she'll think twice again. But it's mad that people don't think, I'll just put my foot on the brake a bit harder. That's obviously, that might be a good solution to this situation.
I saw a post that somebody shared on Facebook yesterday, and it said, if you think that passing by a horse and rider within a metre is safe and acceptable, please stand on that side of the yellow line as a train goes past. And I know that obviously horses aren't trains, but the train's not coming off the track unless something really bad happens, but you don't know what that horse is doing. And I thought that was quite a sort of, I quite liked that. I thought it was good.
Yeah, because a horse can spook at 56 miles an hour. Did you know that?
Yes, I think you dropped that truth bomb before and I was like, oh, scary.
And that's scary. So if you're not going 10 miles an hour, you're not going to be able to stop. Anyway, how's your week been? How are you doing?
It's been good. I had 2 things I wanted to share this week. The first was an article I read in Your Horse yesterday.
I know you're going to say this, and I'm so excited to talk about this. This is life-changing.
Yeah, I shared it on my story because I thought this is really exciting, and a lot of people were very excited. So basically, I'm just getting the right information in front of me. Basically, the British Riding Club have changed their rules so that riders can now use their voice during tests, and they can have no nosebands. And what they've said is that you're permitted to use your voice provided that it's discreet and does not distract others, and nosebands are no longer compulsory. And when they were asked about it by Your Horse, they said the welfare and safety of both the horse and rider is always the most important thing for us to consider, and for that reason we regularly review the rules we have in place. Going forward, riders can now use discrete vocal aids in their dressage tests to support their natural riding aids, such as tongue clicking. However, the use of the voice must remain unobtrusive and must not cause distraction or interference to other riders, horses, or officials. And when I shared this, quite a few people were like, this is really exciting. I love training my horse in this way. And I had one message from somebody who works for an RDA centre. And she was saying that they often train their horses for voice for their clients, and that being able to go out and do that at competitions is a really lovely thing. And I just thought, wonderful. All round. I don't know why this hasn't been allowed before. It's very cool.
It's the most archaic rule to be silent. What on earth? Like,
well,
I have so many feelings. I just have so many feelings. Go on, what were you going to say?
Somebody messaged me and said that they had a coach who said, if you use your voice, it's a trick. It's not a movement. And I thought that's exactly the attitude that we're literally trying to avoid it's like very snobby. If you ask with your voice, you're not really asking. Like as if that's not more impressive than doing a pressure and release aid. I don't know. I just think it's very cool.
Yeah, when I train, the way I train the horses, we train everything with a voice aid. And so actually it gets to the point where, so like we have a pattern where we ask the horse to yield from a stick. So the stick is an extension of your arm, and you like sweep the stick gently towards the body, and you may touch the body with the stick, but you're never like using the stick like a fear aid. But at the same time as doing that, you make that noise. And you get to the point, like Zora, I don't even need a stick. I just make the noise and I direct her with my hand, like I just point as if I had a stick in my hand, and she just softly yields her body around me.
Yeah.
And I think to myself, how amazing if we can get to the point where we can ride a whole dressage test with less pressure, with less use of a stick, with less use of your leg, actually, like less pressure of your leg, yes, less having to kick or whatever it might be. I just think this is the future. Like, this is magic, and I'm really excited about it. I really love it.
Yeah, it's really cool. So that was the first thing that I wanted to share, because I just think that was really fun. And if you've not seen it, then it really made me want to go and look for British Riding Club competitions actually, so I could do that. So that's really fun, and hopefully you all feel the same. And then the second thing is I went to Hickstead last weekend, and we did cross-country training with a lady called Alicia Port-Brown, who's a 4-star eventer. And actually, I did a vlog on YouTube, which I've not done in ages, but you can see it all from the GoPro point of view. So you can see, I show every single attempt, because he doesn't go over things first time, and that's okay. Go on.
It's a bloody brilliant video. I watched the
Thanks,
whole
mate.
of it. I may or may not be making a return to YouTube at some point shortly. And so I went on YouTube to get some inspo, and damn did I get some inspo. It was such a good video, and it was so nice to see like the good bits, the not good bits, your riding, the support you got, the jump. I loved it. I felt like I was riding Harley, and it felt great. Highly recommend it.
He is great to ride. It was so lovely because, like I said, Alicia is a 4-star event rider, and it's so nice to see that her techniques are also really kind. So as an example, you'll see if you watch the video, but I go out of the water and I go to jump this quite wide sort of blue and white house, and Harley is like, whoa, what is that? And we try to jump it I think 3 times before we jump it, and each time she's like, that's okay, let him have a look. That's all right. It is quite scary. And then, we walk around it and we let him look at it, and all these techniques that are just like, she was just very kind of unemotional about the whole thing. And it wasn't like, give him a big, kick and a smack. And it was just like, that's all right. Let's have a look. Give him a moment. Let's process. Let's represent. It was all very non-emotional. And it wasn't until I got back in the lorry and I was driving home that I realised that I had been very unemotional about the fact that he had been struggling with things. And I say that in a positive way, because previously horses stopping and running out and things would have started to degrade my own confidence. And I'd have started to be like, oh, they're not going to jump and I'm going to fall off and da-da-da. And in that session, it just didn't even occur to me. I was just like, yep, we're just going to come again. How can I support him better? What am I going to do? And it was it's the first time it's been like that. And I do put that down to the training I've been doing with Nikki, the mindset stuff. It was very cool.
But do you remember a while ago you posted about jumping some fillers for the first time? And you did speak about this then, and you said, why are we so worried when a horse tells us they're not sure of something?
Yeah.
It's okay. It's okay if a horse comes to a stop like that. It's not like that means they're going to learn how to stop. Actually, what you'll probably find is they will learn how to not have to shout. And actually what maybe you would learn is to go and, say to the coach at the beginning, which jumps do you think we're going to be jumping? And then you walk round and you let him go and do that little process before you ever present him to them. And then you might find that you can start to reduce that. So you just learn what they need. I just think it's a really good mindset to have, just because a horse stops. I think people should watch it, because there's 2 different ways that horses stop. Some horses will stop and put their neck up. And what that tells me is they're not really affected by the jump. They are affected by jumping. Or they will stop and they will put their nose down, as Harley does.
Yeah.
And they are looking at what they are jumping. 2 different things. If your horse is stopping and putting the neck up, you probably have a reason for them not wanting to jump. The jump is too big. You missed. You had a bad stride. They are in pain. This is very general advice, by the way. It's very, very simplified. But the way that Harley was stopping, he was like, what is that? I need to look. And so it's like, okay, let's look. And, you and I could do some work from the ground where we teach him a bit about how to go towards a pressure. We do a lot of that, going over a tarpaulin, going over spooky things from the floor, whatever it might be, and how to teach him to go towards things rather than making him go towards things, showing him how to do it. This is the thing. This is where it comes. It's like that. What is that awareness? And like you were saying, it didn't really affect you because you were like, well, actually, he's just feeling. He just needs to look at things. And like Alicia was doing in such a lovely way, don't worry about it. He's just looking. Come around again. It's okay. You're fine. No need for pressure. And that is, that's a big difference, right?
Yeah, it was nice. And also for your own riding, I was talking to a friend, I'm sure they won't mind. I think they listen to the podcast actually. So And they also had this training, and they were like, oh, I said, how was your day? And they were like, oh, the good bits were this, but the bad bits, I had a few stops and da da da. And I was like, it's training. It's what training is for. And I think when we can remove, because for me, stopping used to mean something. It used to mean that I had failed and that I was embarrassing myself because I couldn't get my horse over the jump, and people would think that I wasn't good, and blah, blah, unravel, unravel, unravel. And now, because I've asked those questions of myself and I'm in a slightly different place, I'm just like, this just means nothing. Like, this is just processing. This is exactly what training is. It felt no different to me than if I hadn't quite struck off on the right lead or something else that's benign. And I do think that if you ask yourself, what does it mean if your horse stops and you have a reaction? Why does that mean something? What has your brain made that mean? And why does that matter to you? Starts to become quite a fun, not fun, it's actually quite uncomfortable, but it's a good conversation to have with yourself.
It will get less uncomfortable as you go on.
It does.
Yeah.
But then you find harder things to deal with, and then it gets uncomfortable over again. But it's good. It's all good.
Because the bar keeps moving. But it was so wonderful to watch that whole training session that you shared, because you could really see the process of it. The start and the finish. I like to I'm going to spoil it for people because tell me off afterwards, but you jump the most lovely round at the end, and you go in the water, out the water, up and over the scary house, round over the logs, up the steps. And the rhythm is like, I felt like I was, if anybody listened to this who doesn't ride a horse anymore and would love the feeling of riding a horse again, go and watch that video. It was... And there is something about finding that middle ground in the canter where it just starts to be, you're not trying to see a stride at that point. It's just happening for you. Pièce de résistance is that. That is that feeling of, okay, here we are. You see those hunters in America, the hunter jumpers.
Oh, yes, they have a very consistent
and they canter in that beautiful way, and they just keep coming, sorry if I've just offended anyone, but they just keep coming to that fence in that way. You have that. They train like that for a reason.
I love it. Thank you so much. That's so kind. I was talking to my coach about it after, and she said, I wonder if you'll agree with this or if you'll have a different perspective. She said he's quite interesting as a horse because she said most horses in those sort of scenarios fall into one of two buckets. They're either they think really fast, everything's really fast and everything's quite rushed, and it can be quite frantic when they're under pressure, or they think quite slow, they need a lot of time, you have to build things slowly and build bricks, etc. And she said he's really interesting for her to train or for us to train, because he's very, very quick when it comes to like spotting things and spooking and moving, and he can be very, very fast. She said, but actually, in terms of his learning brain, we add things one at a time. He likes to have time to figure things out. He likes to understand where he's going. And that's why by the end, he's like, oh, I know exactly what I'm jumping. I know the direction. I know the vibes. I've got it. But he does need a minute sometimes to just process what's happening. And you have to remember that Irish draft part of him that just needs an extra second, which is where all that looking at the jump comes from.
100%. And I also think that maybe... hot take, this is also because I don't think that you let him learn on his own enough.
Oh my god, no, go on, tell me more.
So like, teach him how to go over things on his own, teach him how to approach things on his own, teach him how to let him make those mistakes without a person on top, so you can say to him, can you go towards this hard thing? And him saying, yes, actually, slowly I can. Okay, you work it out. It's kind of like giving the responsibility back. Because when you're on board, yeah. And you and I have spoken about it. Like, I know that you're a bit scared of lunging him because you're like, well, I don't need to lunge him because of his legs, right?
I don't like. So just to clarify, I don't like lunging any horses because I have a weird thing about legs and circles.
Exactly.
And
right.
It's not that I'm scared of lunging Harley as
no
per se.
And I'm look, that's okay, but I think there is an element when we work our horses without a person on their back or a person at their side, when we are behind them on the long lines, for example, on the double lunge, out on the lunge, over poles, there is an element of learning that takes place that we can't replicate when we're on their back. You don't have to go, I don't agree with lunging horses till they're tired. I do not agree with lunging for that reason. But I do think there is a benefit to sending your horse away from you by 10 meters and asking them how they move. How are you feeling in your body? Can you sustain yourself around a 20-meter circle with your own balance? Because I'm not there to hold you up.
No, I do like that. I think that's very fair.
Maybe
And I
just
love
food for
the
thought.
idea of, exploring things from the ground, like tarpaulin and fillers and things, because I have been told that before, that I try to look after him quite a lot. And like, that's lovely in some ways, but in other ways, you know, I've had coaches be like, he needs to figure this out, so just get out of the way, leave him to it, let him make the mistake. Grid work is great for that, because you do just stay out of the way. But it takes practice not to be like, I've got you, darling, just don't worry.
Mummy's here.
Literally.
Did you birth him?
No.
Did you?
Yeah.
No. And that is, you know, I heard that mummy mentor. We must be mentor.
As in mummy versus mentor, not mummy mentor. Yeah.
And you can love them, you can care for them, you can cherish them, you can pet them and snuggle them, but you are not there to do it for them. And if we've got this lovely young horse that's come in, but the wheels fell off when she arrived because she'd never been anywhere else in her life. She had grown up since a foal in one place. And I've had to have, I have to be quite like clear and consistent with her that she can handle this, because she's quite volatile, chucking her weight around, doesn't know what to do with herself. The energy is quite high. All of her needs are met. She's going in the field all the time. She's always got friends, and she's really starting to regulate now. But the first week was like, she was like, I am in a new place and this is very hard. And if I had gone and held her hand in that moment, probably would have got run over. Yeah. And this is obviously the extreme of this. But also, she wouldn't then have got to a place now where she can stand at the end of the rope from me. I can direct her around me. I can say, how do you feel? How do I feel? How do we feel in our environment? And it's like that space that maybe she hasn't been asked to have. And her owner said, seeing you work with her, I realised that she touches me a lot. Just that check-in. Just, are you there? Just
Holly does that with me.
Yeah, I bet he does.
Yeah. And I love it because obviously I'm a mummy and I'm like, yes, adore me, please. I love you too.
But he weighs nearly 700 kilos. And in the moment when then he needs you to do something for him because he hasn't learned how to do it for himself, then he's dangerous. Because then you've got 700 kilos climbing up your heels. No thanks.
Well, stay tuned for the transition from mummy to mentor.
Can't wait. I'm offering you that free coaching anytime you want it.
Yeah, I love it.
We should have a check-in. Anyway, there we are. Good update. Love that.
And great timing, because we're about to invite Maisie on to talk about all things cycles and, well, I don't want to spoil it really, but cycles, the moon, lots of other fun things. Yep.
I love the moon.
That's such a Miri sentence. You should get that on a t-shirt. I love the moon.
Literally. Oh, this is going to be great.
Quick question. When was the last time you had a proper clear out of your tack room? Because I'm willing to bet most of us have at least one rug we'll never use again, or that saddle that we keep just in case. And I feel personally attacked because I have both of these things. This is where the Horse Trust comes in. They're running a pre-loved tack and equipment appeal, and they'd love to give your unused gear a second life. Maybe your old rugs will keep one of their rescue horses warm this winter. Maybe that saddle that you've been tripping over will be sold at their second-hand sale to fund vital care. It's such an easy way to support incredible work. You clear space, they gain resources, and horses benefit. Everybody wins. Plus, there's something really lovely about knowing your kit is still out there doing good, isn't there? If you've got pre-loved tacks, rugs, or other horsey equipment you'd like to donate, visit horsetrust.org.uk/support-us/donate-tack for all the details. Your old gear could make all the difference to a horse in need. Back to the podcast. Maisie, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh my gosh, I am so excited to be here. I've been on so many podcasts, but this is my first ever equestrian podcast. So I've been like very excited about coming on. So I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. So Maisie, I don't even know how to begin introducing you. You are a master certified life coach. You are a best-selling author. You are a hormonal specialist. You coach, and you have this incredible kind of I don't know what the correct term is really, but coaching. What's the word? Toolkit.
Yeah,
and membership. That's the word I was looking for.
Oh, the membership. Yeah.
Yeah. And more importantly, just before we started recording, we were all gushing about the fact that we're massive fans of ACOTAR. And for me, that's probably the number one thing I look for in a podcast guest. So you've hit all the boxes, really.
That's it. We're done now. We've already had our preamble.
Exactly. I'm quite happy sometimes that the red button isn't pressing play when we're discussing some of our preambles. Anyway.
There we are. Maisie, can you tell us a bit about how you got into what you do, what inspired you to write maybe your first book, Period Power, and go from there.
Yeah, it was a long time coming. That was like 20 years. I wrote Period Power, my first book, about 20 years after I first started getting into hormones and understanding the menstrual cycle. So growing up as a teenager, I struggled with period pain, quite intense period pain, and I went on the pill in my older teen years. I didn't get on well with that. I was on it because of the pain, but also for contraceptive reasons. It wasn't great for my mood, as lots of people experience. So I came off that and I was suddenly like, well, I feel great because I'm off it. And like, I feel like I have a very different experience of myself in a good way. But, oh, bollocks, I've got the period pain to deal with. So I went on this journey to try and figure that out. And I saw all sorts of practitioners for all sorts of things. And it kind of figured out what worked for me. And then I started getting interested in it more and more. And I started training in said therapies. So I started out as a practitioner doing massage and reflexology and things. And then I did my degree in acupuncture, but all the while getting more and more interested in female reproductive health. And I was also working as a birth doula. So this was like in my 20s. So kind of fast forward 15 years. You know, there's only so many times you can give clients drawings of hormones and what's happening in the cycle before you start thinking, maybe I should just do this once and it just be in a book and I don't have to draw it hundreds of times. And yeah, so Period Power was just the culmination of 20 years of working with women one-on-one, helping them with cycle-based issues, fertility, perimenopause, supporting in the childbirth year. So we were talking before we came onto the recording part about me being autistic, and autistic people often have a special interest. And for me, hormones and women's health was a very strong special interest of mine for all that time, and that's how Period Power came about.
And you were also, I hate to dive in too early, so maybe give us a brief overview of some of the major things that you wish women knew about their hormone cycle, and then perhaps we'll talk about how that relates to equestrian environments, as you were saying before.
Yeah, happy to do that. So everyone's cycle is different. So I'm going to give you like a brief overview just so that everyone listening and for us in this conversation have the lay of the land of what we're talking about. But please, everyone listening, don't take how I'm talking about the cycle as me saying that's how your cycle should be, because everyone's cycle is different. everyone has different experiences, but basically when the start of each menstrual cycle is day 1 of your period. Okay. And when you have your period, your hormone levels are quite low. For some people, they won't feel that in any particular way, but a lot of people will experience tiredness or challenging symptoms, etc. And hormone levels are low. Then as we're starting to come out of the period, estrogen starts dripping in. Estrogen has effects, well, all hormones affect us on all of our systems across the body. But as estrogen comes in, typically we start to feel more confident, more outgoing. Our features become more symmetrical, which makes us more attractive to other people.
Did you not know this? Yeah.
No.
So wild, isn't it? Yeah.
Wow.
Estrogen, so this all starts coming in, and so suddenly we start to feel like, oh, maybe we're back in the room again after what's ever happened when we've had our period. And then and I refer to the different phases of the cycle as the seasons. So the time of menstruation is your inner winter. The time as you come out of that pre-ovulation is your spring, and then your summer is ovulation, and premenstrual is autumn.
I love that.
I know, it's so
nice.
good just to have a very common language that we're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I can relate to what is happening seasonally in the year to what's happening inside me. So spring, we're starting to feel all right and maybe a bit curious and interested in the world. This is when we might start to get ideas for all our training programs of like, right, what am I going to do with my horse now? What's our goal? What's our plan? And then as we head into ovulation, estrogen is starting to peak, and we also have the appearance of testosterone. And that is a really powerful double whammy, because often we're feeling really good, and testosterone makes us more like ambitious and competitive and more up for risk taking, which from a hormonal point of view, this is the time in the cycle where we are fertile. So your body, whether you want to conceive or not, has this ulterior motive of find a mate, have sex, get knocked up, right? So because of that, we will do things like walk longer distances. Because if you think back to our evolutionary past, everyone living around us would have been genetically close to us. So if when we're fertile, if we walk further, we're going to find a mate who is genetically diverse compared to us and produce superior offspring, right? And this is what happens. People are like more up for it. Like, and I definitely noticed this in my riding. I'm like way more up for doing something challenging or like going off to do something, a camp somewhere, when it ties in with this part of my cycle. But of course, we don't stay in this part of the cycle forever.
I often think if women could stay in that ovulation space, we would rule the world like fully. Like men wouldn't have a chance.
Like men do though, because that's it, right? They just have testosterone every day.
This is the thing. So this is a really important part, actually, especially when it comes to like negative self-talk and inner criticism, because often we're feeling really good then and we're like nailing it with our horses and we're feeling like our best selves and we're like, this is brilliant. And then we ovulate and all those hormones just like do a disappearing act overnight. And if you know that, then you can just be like, well, my hormone levels are low. But when you don't know that, that's when you're like, oh, I'm so unreliable. And, you know, what's wrong with me? Yesterday I felt this way. Today I felt like this. And then we have all our internalized misogyny about, you know, how we're inconsistent and we're roller coasters and blah, 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 blah. So anyway, then estrogen, testosterone drop. And then in the premenstrual phase of the cycle, estrogen comes back, but it's kind of more of a supporting act in that sense, because progesterone is the dominant hormone. And progesterone is a really interesting hormone. And for some people, it can have a very calming effect on the nervous system. It can really help you with sleep, for example. But for some people, it can produce mood changes in terms of low mood or anxiety, things like that. Now, I have come to love the premenstrual phase of the cycle. I think in my 20s and 30s, I didn't know how to be in my premenstrual phase of the cycle. Because remember how I said that in the run up to ovulation, finding a mate and having sex is the goal, right? Because of that, estrogen makes us gloss over the details in a partner that would put us off them, right? So we don't spot the pile at the bottom of the stairs. And we're like, oh, he didn't do the dishes. Whatever, he's hot. Let's have sex, right? That's what our hormones are doing.
The bare minimum becomes really acceptable.
Yeah, exactly. So then premenstrually, those glasses, the rose-tinted glasses, are off. And now we're seeing actually the things that aren't working for us, which is important because otherwise we would just be going along with things that aren't actually acceptable. So now I'm like, oh, that's the phase of my cycle that really highlights the things that need to change, either that I actually need to change or that I need to adapt my thinking towards in order for them to be successful. And then right before the period starts, hormones drop off again and we're in that low hormone state. So that's your whistle-stop tour of the menstrual cycle.
And can you run through some of the things that women are so commonly being affected by, but maybe we aren't educated on when we're young? You know, you do your sex ed class, don't you, in whatever year it is at school, and you put a condom on a banana and you watch a woman have a baby in a bath and it's pretty traumatic, and then they talk about tampons a bit, and then that's about as much as I can remember. Like, are there some things that you feel women should be more educated on other than knowing their cycle, like you were just talking about? Like, are there some things that maybe, is there anything else basically that we should really understand?
Yeah, something really basic, but please, everyone listening, don't use me saying it's basic to shame yourself for not knowing the difference, because if you don't know the difference between what I'm about to say, that is not your fault. Your vagina is internal. It is your inside, right? Your vulva is everything external. Your labia, your clitoris, all of those wonderful parts make up your vulva. Usually when people are talking about the vulva, they say vagina. Very different parts. And it's not that complicated, but no one uses this language. And I can remember even when I was learning to ride, because I'm an adult learner, when I was learning to ride in the riding school, like for me, talking about vulvas and things is like saying leg. Like there's no difference. It's a body part, and I'm going to use the correct anatomy. I would never say, that my elbow was the shoulder or something like that. So I'm used to saying these things. My son, he's now 9. He knows the correct words. He doesn't have any issue with them because he's been socialized in an environment where talking about body parts is normal. So back in my riding school days, there was one particular horse that had a saddle that would do damage to my labia every time I rode this horse. And I started off thinking, well, I'm a novice rider. It's probably the way I'm riding. I'm doing something wrong that is having this effect. But I was riding this horse quite a lot, and I was going on a beach hack that was going to be 3 hours, and I think, oh my gosh, I have got to figure out a plan for this. So I bought like a lovely gel cover for the saddle. Great. And then I left the riding school that night and I forgot to take it home with me, and I just ended up leaving it on his saddle. I just kept forgetting to take it off. And I had gone up to the instructors and being like, just so you know, every time I ride this horse, like I get tears on my labia and I don't think that's okay. And they were like, oh my God, she said labia. Like, what do we do? What do we do?
Call the HR team. I think we've done something wrong. The police will be here soon. Sexual harassment has occurred. It's just, people really just get really nervous about that kind of thing, for sure.
They do. But then slowly but surely, other riders in the school were coming up to me and saying, "Oh, Maisie, thank you so much for that gel cover, because every time I ride that horse." And interestingly, the instructors have been trying to say that it was my anatomy that was the issue.
Whoa.
Like, not even my riding, that there was something about my labia.
Stop it. That's such an insane thing to do.
Issue. It is. But then when you think about often the language we use, even around mares in equestrianism, it's very derogatory. It's very this internalized misogyny comes through in our attitude towards mares. And I'm just like, this is a predominantly female environment. Like, it's all girls, it's all women. What is so weird with saying these words?
Yeah.
100%.
So that's my soapbox. Like, let's just use the correct anatomy and not have a problem with it.
Yeah.
Like, you would never have a man being like saying testicles instead of penis.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've really
just
got all the
happen.
words out there now. If we hadn't said a sexual word,
Bingo
no,
card.
I'm going to say that again. If we hadn't said an anatomically correct word of the genitalia, we have now said nearly all of them.
Yeah.
There we are.
But you're so right, and I often think about. I had this moment in my life where I realised that like the contraceptive pill and actually alcohol had a really adverse effect on my mental health in terms of what you said, low mood and anxiety. And when I was much younger, I didn't know those feelings were coming from my relationship to these two things. And I obviously thought it was me, and that's really scary when you're younger and blah, blah, blah. And I remember then years later learning about, and don't quote me on this, but this is what I learned about the toxicity of some menstrual products. And I actually changed my menstrual products after that when I realised what was in them, some of them. And I just thought, imagine how powerful it would be if actually when we were much younger, much more vulnerable, we learned about this stuff and the effects that it can have on our feelings. And then we learned to understand that not all feelings are just who we are. Actually, they can be externally affected.
Yeah,
100%.
definitely.
The contraceptive pill, and I'd like to go into a bit more detail on this, is so, in my experience, just blanketed out to girls at 16, 17, maybe. Oh, you've got acne, give you the pill. Oh, you've got pain, give you the pill. Oh, your periods are quite heavy, give you the pill. And I've been on like a real journey with my hormones in my life. I took the pill from when I was 16 to 26, and I got to the age of 26 and I was like, I don't know who I am without these chemicals and hormones in my body. And it's not saying it's necessarily been totally plain sailing and it's a complicated thing to learn about because there's so little, other than magical people like yourself, Maisie, educating us on it. But I've had to learn the hard way, I suppose, in some elements, in the sense of learning what is right and normal for me. But just recently, and I know that she won't mind me saying this, but I have a client whose daughter had really heavy periods, and she has really heavy periods herself. And she went to the doctor and she said, with her daughter, she said, my daughter is having really difficult this. And they said, you can have the pill. And she was like, hang on a sec. We are not going to do any investigation at all. And thankfully, because she is a doula herself, she is a breastfeeding consultant, she knows about women's health, she was like, no. she's 14, I think, 13, 14, and that was something that was just instantly, that was the only option she was given. And actually she's gone through, she's gone a different route and gone through lots of different investigation. She's advocated for her child in that time. And I think there's not necessarily somebody doing that. You're 16 and you're maybe becoming active, and you're given that is the only choice that you've got to stay safe. And it is only the woman's responsibility. Sorry.
Yes.
Well, you bring up a really interesting point, which is, and I think, Maisie, you have thoughts on this, the relationship women have to doctors and healthcare versus men, the way that they're treated versus symptoms. And even actually your saddle story, I'm sure that I've read that most saddles were designed for male anatomy, not female pelvises, and that changes how we're able to sit in them. Not every saddle, but most. So maybe we could touch on that. The difference between even the science being based on male anatomy than women's, right?
Yeah, I've also read the same. I don't know the origin of it, but I've read the same in terms of saddles. But they're, in so many spheres of women's life, we find that the stuff we're using on a day-to-day basis has its origins in being designed for men, and we're just treated as smaller versions of them. But it's disappointing even in accessing healthcare. And, we all know the NHS is under tremendous challenges right now, and GPs are as well. But I find myself recommending to friends and things like, well, if you're going for an appointment about anything to do with your reproductive health, whether it's perimenopause or, period pain, have you thought about taking someone male with you?
Wow.
And I hate that I'm suggesting that, because we shouldn't need to do it, but they get treated very differently when there's a man in the room.
Wow. Do we know what? Is that because they think if you've told a man it must be bad? Or is it just that there's a dominance to having a male in the room? Why is that?
Yeah, I think it's just a different response. And I think women are we're just treated so differently. And also we're used to accepting that. So this is the other thing, like when it comes to women's health issues, often what we've had modeled to us from our mum's generation and aunts and grandmothers is like, this is part of being a woman. Like, this is your lot in life, like figure out how to deal with it. So we've also had that messaging of put up with it, or put other people first, take care of everyone else in your family. And if you've got time left over, then go to the doctor. But then just be grateful that you're able to meet with the doctor and go along with what they said, because they know best. Like, even me, when I went, this is before I knew I was autistic, I went to the doctors. My son must have been about 1.5 years, 2 years old. And I started to think, like, have I got postnatal depression, or have I got PMDD, which is premenstrual dysphoric disorder, which in a very basic description is like extreme PMS. It really is very extreme, though, because we would be driving along in the car, and he, as a toddler, would be in the back with his other toddler friend, and they'd be chatting away. And I would think about crashing the car, like, because the noise was so awful for me. Now I know that was being autistic, and that's amplified premenstrually for me, and I understand it. But back then I was like, maybe I've got PMDD, which a lot of autistic people do, by the way. Anyway, I go to the doctor, and this is me, Period Powers Out. It's a best-selling book. I know what I'm talking about. I have all the research. I understand. And I've got this plan for how I'm going to navigate the medical system to get support. And also, I'm managing to get there. I've got a toddler. He's not in childcare. But anyway, I get there. I tell the doctor, like, I'm having intrusive thoughts. I'm, like, really concerned about what's going on. And he said, well, make an appointment to speak to the female nurse.
Oh my God.
And I didn't know what to do in that scenario. And I think that's the thing, regardless of strategies for navigating the health system, I think sometimes we just need support of someone else there, because if your nervous system has a tendency to go into freeze mode or fawn, which is people pleasing, as most of us, that's just what we do in terms of stress responses. Okay. And that's what happened to me. And suddenly, like, yeah, it doesn't matter if you've written a book and you know all the research, because if in that moment your body's like, yeah, okay, now I just need to get out of here, because this guy actually doesn't feel safe for me to even be talking to about this. And he's actually dismissing it, so, and then you're like, okay, well, am I going to go back? Like, is that female nurse actually going to listen to me? So I mean, there's so many issues. It's kind of like, where do we start? But I think listening to women would be a great place to start.
I mean, that's kind of not unbelievable because that sounds dismissive, but that is it's kind of an awful story. I mean, how did you resolve that? Did you, because you said that was before your autism diagnosis, so did that kind of pull on a thread to getting that diagnosis, or were the two things ended up being quite separate and you sort of left it there?
Good question. I think it was kind of with hindsight that I was able to look back on that. I mean, luckily for me, with all of my skills and knowledge base, I was able to be like, okay, from Chinese medicine perspective, I'm going to do this. Okay,
Wow,
in
so it was
terms of
yourself.
emotional support with friends. But like, I could only do that because I already had that knowledge. Most people do not. Most people don't have the support network of professionals that I have, on my phone.
And I think it's a good moment to mention that, something like endometriosis often has an average diagnosis time of 8 years.
At least I would say, yeah.
And that's probably, that's an average, isn't it? So like there will be some people who will never be diagnosed, or they wait till they're 50 to find out, and then they have to have a hysterectomy because...
Yeah, or they're having a hysterectomy and then they go, oh, by the way, we found all this endometriosis that explains all the pelvic pain you've had for all your life,
It's just... And can you talk a bit about... do you... Okay, this is a question that is a bit maybe deep, but I believe... I don't know if you've heard of a guy called Gabor Mate.
Yes.
He talks a lot about psychologically the... untreated trauma and abuse that women suffer, and how that affects the way our bodies work in terms of inflammation, in terms of things like breast cancer. Maisie's giggling, so I don't know if
I'm trying hard not to just interrupt you.
Okay, well, I'll finish and then you can go, because I feel like we're going to get into this a lot, because I know for a fact that when my inflammation is lower, I've done this whole thing, I've done loads of hormone testing, blood testing, saliva testing, lots of different things at different times, and hair testing as well, which is maybe a bit more woo, but homeopathic, that bioresonance stuff. And I have really learnt that when I am lower inflammation, when my stress is lower, when all of those things are better, that my body doesn't struggle so much to have a normal cycle. My period is less painful, things just kind of happen more naturally. Can you touch on this a bit? Because Gabor Mate has some amazing opinions on it, and he said in one of his books that he went to a breast cancer institute, and they have loads of data on these women having undiagnosed trauma and abuse in their lives, and 80% of the women with breast cancer have it in their file, but nobody's doing anything about it, and nobody's talking to them about it.
So here's the thing. I think, yes, inflammation is a massive issue. Right, it affects so many things. Inflammation is related to so many reproductive conditions, but also, people who have painful periods, and it's not as a result of a particular condition like endometriosis or adenomyosis. So, yes, across the board, as a society, when we can reduce inflammation, that's going to have tremendous benefit.
And when we talk about inflammation, just for people who aren't aware, that's like caused by, is it like, I think I've read this, it's like ultra processed food can cause inflammation, like stuff like that, right? In our bodies, is that right?
Yeah, stress levels, like there can be like types of food, nutritional status, sleep quality and quantity. Like there's so many things in our environment and our life experience that create inflammation. And those inflammatory processes, once they're kicked off, they're linked to all sorts of diseases across the board. So I agree, reducing inflammation is a beneficial thing for most people, right? I think it's really damaging to suggest that conditions like endometriosis are a result of abuse or trauma. Now, do I think there's a massive overlap between women who have endometriosis and adenomyosis and women who have experienced trauma and abuse? Yes. But the statistics on how many women have been abused are sky high anyway. And women with endometriosis, also a pretty high statistic. I think I do think that the crossover of those things, if you're someone with endometriosis and you've also experienced trauma and you are navigating those things, and then there's the interplay of how they can come together, like that's a very nuanced conversation to have. But I think it's one of those ways that we can kind of subtly dismiss women in saying, oh, this is because of trauma. Mm-hmm. I really take issue with that. It's kind of like a weird thing, because it's kind of like you're acknowledging trauma in women, but also using it against them. And it's kind of, it plays into this subtle narrative of it's all in your head. Right? Not that the trauma is all in your head, but you've experienced trauma and now it's something that you've created for yourself. And then suddenly we're not getting research into dealing with endometriosis on a scientific level. Somehow now it's just about you processing your trauma. So instead you go to the doctor and you're like, I've got endometriosis lesions everywhere. They're not just in my pelvis. Like, you discover that they're in your diaphragm and even in your eye and affecting you in massive ways. Imagine if that doctor's then, well, I think you just need to go and process some trauma, go and do some EMDR and have some therapy. Like, that is not a place we want to end up. And my concern with that kind of narrative is it's pushing us in that direction. That's not to say that having professional support and working through trauma isn't beneficial, or that reducing inflammation wouldn't be beneficial, especially with endometriosis, because there's a big inflammatory response there. But it's also a very real condition. Oh,
I think this
feels good to get on all these soapboxes.
Good. I'm so pleased. And this feels like a good moment maybe to discuss how often a lot of the sort of fads, did some air quotes, like the ice bath thing. You know, people became obsessed with ice baths, intermittent fasting, you know, lots of these things that are maybe, yes.
I'm whispering, man.
Yeah. And I wondered if you could touch on this, because you were talking about how we need to be careful that science doesn't stop because people blame one thing for something. Can you touch on that a bit, about where a lot of our science comes from for humans? Like, and why? I know a little bit of the why, but I'm very interested to hear your take on this.
I'm not even sure. I have to think about that for a moment.
Well, one of the things that I heard was that we're too complicated to study.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yes.
Because we have a cycle, so we're not consistent.
Oh, we
enough.
As women, you mean?
We as women, sorry, I was speaking collectively to the women in the room, is that we're too complicated because we have this cycle and we're all different, and some people's luteal phase will be long and short, and some people ovulate at blah, blah, blah day, and whatever it might be. And that's why we're too complicated. You can't study us, so we just have to study men because they're straightforward. Look at them with their 24-hour hormone cycle.
So us with our menstrual cycles make us unreliable test subjects for research studies.
Sorry, it's not funny, obviously. I'm just...
It's not funny, ha-ha. It's like funny, weird.
It's just such nonsense, because you would never think, okay, if I said to you, oh, you know, a man wakes up in the morning and he's a bit tired, but he has a bit of coffee and some breakfast and, you know, has his protein shake or whatever it is he's doing, leaving crumbs all over the countertop. Anyway, does all of that. And maybe he's like, now he's got more energy and, like, you know, he's like rocking his life and he has his meetings, and then it's lunchtime. So he eats his lunch and he gets a bit tired after lunch. But, you know, that's how people feel after they eat lunch, you know, and then he has like a second wind in the afternoon and he goes about his day. And then, it's the evening and he's kind of winding down, and then eventually he gets sleepy and he goes to sleep. How unreliable of him to vary throughout a 24-hour cycle. And of course, it's the same for women, right? We're no different. We vary across the cycle of day and night, the diurnal cycle. But no one accounts for that in research studies. But then suddenly when you extend that cycle, which is, if you go back to how I described an average menstrual cycle, pretty much the same, right? Low energy in the morning, starts picking up, really on it, and then a bit of a slump after lunch, and then kind of, the rest of the day goes on. But when we suddenly make it about women's bodies and about the menstrual cycles, suddenly it's a totally different conversation. So yes, I take issue with that as well. I've got a lot of issues with things.
Good for you, and sorry to the men who are listening, but also thanks for continuing to listen, because it's really important, and the women in your life will thank you.
It is. And you know what? I've had so many women contact me saying, I bought your book, Period Power, and I was so excited to read it, and my boyfriend stole it off my bedside table.
Green flag.
Yeah. And I actually know I had a client who told me that she would take it on dates. So on her profile, like on her Hinge profile or whatever, she would put about like how she loves books. So then inevitably she'd go on a date and the person would say, what are you reading right now? And she would pull out of her book, Period Power,
Ta-da!
in a restaurant, wherever they're at, public space, as a test to see how does he react to this, like the green flag of, am I going to bother continuing? Because if you're actually, gonna shame me for it or be, and it's fair enough, like, be a bit weird about it. We're not saying to men like, oh, you have to respond in this way, because it's a new conversation for many of them as well. But are you willing to have that conversation? Like, even if you're not fully able to right now, are you willing to try? Are you willing to even go there? And thankfully, for the most part, men really are. They love a framework. When I tell them about the seasons, they're like, oh, got it. Like, now I know how to support my partner. Now I understand what's going on. And then, you can really have that conversation.
I love that.
Well, this feels like a lovely moment. We've talked a little bit about how hormone cycles and chemicals and other things in the body cross over with environments and other things. And I'm really interested to hear your take on all of your research and your area of expertise as an equestrian, because equestrian sport is so interesting. It's like very female dominated until you get to the top, and then it's quite a lot of men. And also just the way that we interact with one another. Like, it's known for being quite a challenging sport in terms of humans. So what's your take on it?
We've all got them, haven't we? That saddle gathering dust in the tack room that doesn't quite fit anymore. I know I've got quite a few. The rugs your horse has outgrown. The bridle you replaced but can't quite bring yourself to throw away, or maybe 4 or 5. Well, here's the thing. Those pre-loved items could make a real difference to horses in need. The Horse Trust is always looking for donations of tack, rugs and equipment, whether it's something our herd can use directly or items we can sell in our second-hand sale. Every single donation helps support the horses in our care. And let's be honest, it feels good to know your old faithful turnout rug or that trusty saddle is going somewhere. It'll be appreciated, doesn't it? You get to clear out your tack room and do something wonderful at the same time. So if you've been meaning to have a sort out, now is the perfect time. Head to thehorsetrust.org.uk/support us/donate tack to find out what we're looking for and how to donate. Your pre-loved gear could give our horses the care they deserve. The link is in the show notes. Head over, do your bit while clearing out your tack room for the Horse Trust.
It really is. So before I got into horses and started riding, I would be coaching my clients in the membership, and we've got hundreds of people in there. So I would be coaching all these women on their lives, and I'd be thinking, who the hell are these people that you're having to deal with? Like in my mind, whilst I'm coaching them, I'm also thinking, oh my God, like, who are these people? Right. Especially because so many of my friends are life coaches and I just live in the bubble that I'm in, And then I started interacting with what I would call the civvies, like the non-coach people, and especially in the world of horses. And I was suddenly like, oh, these are the people that I'm coaching I'm coaching my clients on. And it is interesting because what I see is, first of all, I think there's a lot of autistic women in this world who do not know that they are autistic.
Interesting.
So
What?
I
Go
think
on.
that's a thing. And then what I see is a lot of people, and by the way, I'm not saying that this is specific about the equestrian world. I think it's just, for me, it's been an insight into how lots of people are. So people who don't have much awareness or skill in working with their own emotions or stress responses, who have relational struggles with maybe other humans in their lives, but then that comes through in their relationship with their horses. And lots of talking about people and not talking to people, like not great communication, which is really interesting. Then when we talk about the importance of clear aids and communication with our horses, but yet we don't do the same with humans. I mean, I could go on and on.
This is fascinating. Do you think that there's something about equestrianism and working with horses? And this is the dark side of this question, right? Is that sometimes I look at professionals and particularly the abuse scandals of the last few years, and I have thought to myself, I wonder if there's something about working with the horse that attracts somebody who on some level is looking for a specific power dynamic or control dynamic. And I just wonder whether you think there are certain traits that, or certain personality types that are attracted to working with horses, not just from a dark side, but
yeah, but I think there would be lots of versions of that. There would be the people who are interested in having power over, and maybe those people have been on the other side of that, where they've grown up in environments, like in their family dynamics, where they have been a victim to someone having power and control over them. And then that's what's been modeled to them. So even if they didn't like their experience of it, there's some wiring going on that then means that they're carrying that out with horses or people on the yard or whatever it is. But then equally, you could say, well, there's people who, you know, really connect with horses and really love horses, and, you know, that kind of can get in the way of them being successful with some groundwork and things, because they don't want to ask the horse to move over or to do something. And they're like, oh, no, I can't do that. And maybe those people have also been on the receiving end of those power dynamics. And then now they're terrified to be the quote unquote aggressor or like the one pushing someone else around. And so sometimes then, you know, you see that relationship with the horse going into some interesting places. So, you know, so I think you can go into lots of places with that. But I do agree, it's a fascinating. My friend Chloe and I often talk about this. There should be a reality TV show about a yard.
can you imagine? Oh my gosh! Or the Traitors Equestrian Edition. That would be a great a great genre. You can have that one for free, Netflix or whoever's listening. You also mentioned autism, which was a really interesting perspective. And autism is very complicated and has many parts and is very personalized. But as someone who is autistic, what were the things that made you think that lots of undiagnosed autistic people are also equestrians?
We sometimes, like me and my autistic friends, talk about like peer reviews, because to go either to be assessed through the NHS, that can take a long time to do so. Doing it privately costs a chunk of money. But usually autistic people, we kind of get a sense for other people who are autistic, even if their autism is or personality is a bit different to ours. You kind of start thinking, could you maybe be, and so yeah, we just talk about this idea of a peer review
I heard this recently, that actually a really good way of working out if like somebody is autistic or ADHD or something on a spectrum that maybe is they're not totally functioning like as a standard, I'm doing some air quotes, is
neurologically diverse.
Yeah.
Neurologically diverse, and maybe finding some things that are deemed normal very difficult would be to get a large group of people and put them in a room and watch who gravitates to who.
Yeah.
Because actually you do, you know, oh, I feel like that. Oh, you know, we'd have a set of questions or something. That'd be a great way of working out.
Yeah, and it makes a massive difference because, for instance, like my instructor, who I have a very close relationship with, like I really struggle with verbal instructions of any kind. So when it comes to riding, you know, when you're getting verbal instructions, like sometimes thick and fast, and I also have slow audio processing, so it can take me a while to figure out what someone is saying to me. So usually I receive an instruction, I then need to say it out loud for me to figure out what I've been told, which, you know, is great when you've got like a few strides to implement something really quickly. But working with her, the lovely Julia, her brain works very similarly to mine, you know, and it just makes a massive difference. So I think a lot of what I'm seeing is just like in terms of people who also might be autistic, is directness and like strong opinions, binary thinking, struggling with awareness of emotions, which is, you can go either way. My type of autism, I'm hyper aware of my emotions and bodily sensations. Some people have a lot less. Meltdowns and shutdowns. You know, I've been around yards where there's lots of people having like big displays of emotion, and then equally times when they're just like not available at all and totally shut down. And that's not something that's just, the terminology meltdowns and shutdowns is specific to autism and neurodiversity. But of course, it's true of everyone that has a nervous system. We're all going to have that fight flight response, which is like a mobilization of energy and an expression of energy, whether it's to defend yourself, put up a fight, or get away. And then we're going to have that like freeze response, that immobilization, that's, you know, would be like a shutdown for an autistic person. So, you know, we all have these responses, but my friend and I are often clocking who also might be autistic.
Do you think, Maisie, that you could touch on, I want to just draw it back a little bit to the hormones, because there are a few questions that I had in mind, but one of them was, can you touch on a bit like some signs or signals that maybe your hormones aren't like going in quite in the right direction, and then maybe some things that people could look at doing to help? Because I know I speak for a lot of the women that I have come into contact with, including myself, that, you know, long periods, as in having like a very long period or then a very short period, or not really noticing ovulation, or noticing big dips and troughs with our moods and stuff. Like, are there things that what signs are there other than what I've just mentioned that maybe your hormones aren't functioning as they should, and then what we can do about that?
I am so excited to tell you about a brand that I absolutely adore, Flutterby Jewellery. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll know I've been wearing the same pieces constantly since I discovered them at Windsor last summer, and honestly, I've hardly taken them off since. Flutterby is a beautiful UK-based family-run brand founded back in 2004 by sisters-in-law Sal and Louisa. It's real craftsmanship with so much attention to detail. Everything is predominantly sterling silver and gold vermeil, with gorgeous freshwater pearls and semi-precious gemstones. And the best part? It is all incredibly affordable luxury. Their pieces are timeless, yet contemporary, stylish, feminine, and versatile enough to wear every day, but special enough for those well-deserved nights out. I've been wearing mine riding and even at the gym. They are so durable and comfortable that I genuinely forget I have them on. Whether you're at the yard or heading to the champagne bar, these pieces add that perfect touch of glam for every occasion. You might have seen their stand at major events like Badminton Burley or the London International Horse Show. Now, speaking of the London International Horse Show, I have the most incredible giveaway running right now over on my Instagram, @MaryHackett. You could win 2 tickets to the London International Horse Show on Monday night with access to the champagne bar, plus a £50 voucher to spend at Flutterby's stand. The giveaway closes on the 17th of November, so head over to my Instagram to enter. You absolutely don't want to miss this. Flutterby Jewellery. Affordable luxury, sustainably made in the UK with pieces designed to last. Check them out and don't forget to enter the giveaway.
Yeah, I mean, great, by the way. That list of things that you just gave would definitely be where I would start with answering that.
Personal experience.
But I would say, really it's about knowing what's normal for you and then seeing, is that changing? So is your period getting shorter or longer? Are you dealing with heavier blood flow or a decrease in blood? Are you suddenly getting clots when you didn't have them before? Often people will talk about how they've missed a period, and it's not that you've missed a period. It's that you've taken longer to ovulate in the first place. So it's one cycle that's just been longer. And it's also pretty common, to have like one cycle a year that's just a bit weird. Maybe it's a cycle where you didn't actually ovulate, but then your hormones have shifted just enough to have what's known as a withdrawal bleed. And so, you might just have one a year that's a bit weird, but then, you would want to think, well, is that happening on a more regular basis? Especially once we start getting into perimenopause, really thinking about that, the hormonal shifts that start to happen from 35 onwards, but certainly in your 40s, just really thinking, things starting to change. Like, for me, I'm about to turn 45. And so I'm in that category.
Really?
Yeah.
God, I don't want to be like, you look incredible, because that sounds like people who are 45 can't. But my gosh, look on our Instagram, because we're going to have clips of Maisie up there and she looks phenomenal.
What's your secret?
Horses.
You're literally telling us your secret.
So yeah, so certainly now at my age, I'm like tiptoeing more and more into that perimenopause journey where my cycle was, predictably like 28 days. And then a few years ago, it started being 21 or 23 or 32, and consistently like that. So, and then I would start to get night sweats or feel hot when my period was due. Doom and gloom anxiety, which was completely new for me. So all of these things were thinking well, do you just standardly have a crap experience of your cycle? That's worth looking at too. But then also, are things shifting? Where might some support be useful? And usually we start off with the place in the cycle where someone is struggling the most, right? So say you have painful periods or heavy periods, then you would focus on what's going on at menstruation. But really what we're talking about is care throughout the whole of the cycle. And, there's so many lists of various things for each condition and stuff in my book. But what I would say is get the basics. Sleep, nutrient dense food, eating enough, especially, I don't know what it's like for younger generations. Certainly my generation growing up, it was all about calorie deficit, skipping meals. Miri, as you mentioned, this whole fasting thing that's been very dominant on social media. And that's also the thing is all this stuff being shared on social media is useful in one sense, in that we're having these conversations and information and tips are being shared, but is it suitable and appropriate for you on the other end of that screen to be taking? Is that supplement actually useful, or is it going to cause more issues? And I know that there can be accessibility issues for these types of things in terms of seeing a practitioner. You know, it can be cost, it can be your location, time schedules, all of this stuff. But I love recommending going to student clinics. Like, if you're someone who it's going to be a challenge for you to come up with the money to see a nutritionist or an acupuncturist, well, is there a university or training place near you where third year students are getting practice? Because they really know their stuff, and they're fully supervised by people who are really good at that particular thing. And you can go and you can pay £10 instead of 60 or whatever it is, you know. And I think sometimes doing a course of treatment or speaking to someone who can look and like take a case history. And please, on that note, everyone listening, please don't send me your case histories to my DMs. But
what do you mean, Maisie?
People do. I mean,
you don't want thousands of people sending.
Yeah, and I mean, I won't even get started on the things that people have sent me. I mean, I love it that everyone trusts me so much, but, you know, don't send me your scans. Don't send me stuff on the internet. But my point is that there's so many places where you can get help and pay less for it and still get that support. And I just think sometimes it's just really worth doing that rather than spending money on this magnesium and then it's creatine and then it's omega, and you know, you've got a cupboard full of supplements, and actually, you know, maybe just paying someone to get you started might have been more beneficial.
I 100% think this is amazing, and actually really cool to know that there is this option of the help that maybe is they're learning, but like you say, they're supervised, so it's very safe. Because I as I said, I've recently been through a lot of this, and I had a lot of people send me messages like, oh, can you tell me, you've got lots of similar symptoms to me, can you tell me what it is you're taking? And I've said no, I can't, because I don't know what, you know, it's very specific, it's all very, you know, natural stuff. I've not taken any hormone replacement or anything like that, but I've like, my thyroid's quite ineffective and I'm within range, which is very interesting. And I know that you talk about blood testing being a bit of a complicated science on its own. Maybe that's speaking out of turn.
No,
that was my research that led me to that.
Well, I think it's the difference between within range and then optimal that's within range.
Absolutely. And this is the thing, mine is in range, but I'm right at the bottom for my thyroxine.
Yeah.
So I would go to the doctor and I'd say, this is the blood test that I've had. And they'd say, well, you're fine. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm not fine because my anxiety is terrible and my hair's getting thin. And there's lots of different things that are functioning. And because of the help I had from the functional doctor that I worked with, the hormone specialist that I worked with actually, I'm much more getting on the straight and narrow. And one of the things that I really picked up on when you were saying that is going and giving a case history. And so often we don't notice what's going on because we don't write it down, or we're not paying that much attention in those moments, I suppose. We're just seeing it as a whole thing. And like you said, where is it in your cycle that you're really seeing the most difficulty is a kind of a good place to start. And I wonder if that's something that actually people can take from today, is actually just going and writing it down and then being like, oh, it's actually when I ovulate, or it's actually 2 days after my period, or day 2 of my period, or whatever it might be.
But this goes back to the point that we were saying earlier about the importance of this education from an early age. And, you know, when we start menstruating, we start tracking, or at least having a sense of what's going on, even in the most basic of ways. And then you have that information, you know, and it's just there for you. And then you can share it with professionals, whether it's your GP or whether it's your nutritionist, you know. But fundamentally it's about body literacy and you understanding and being able to read your own body, because this is why we end up with issues when women are then trying to conceive and they don't know when they're fertile, and they're not aware of what's going on with their cervical fluid as like a major way of determining when you're in that fertile window. But then we've also got the opposite of women thinking that they need to use contraceptive methods throughout the whole of their menstrual cycle, even in the parts where they're really not going to conceive. But you need to do that in a very responsible, considered way, of course. But, you know, I've spoken to women who are have done human biology at PhD level and didn't know about cervical fluid.
Do you think we should maybe touch on this
Yeah.
as an important? I know that you want to, and I know for a fact that there will be women out there who will have heard that and gone, I don't know enough. I would like to understand. And I know it's maybe a bit taboo, whatever. We've gone past that. We spoke about labia earlier. So let's go there. So can you talk a bit about this and the importance of understanding it?
Yeah, so cervical fluid changes throughout your menstrual cycle. And I think the easiest way I can explain it is women listening to this will know that sometimes when you go to the toilet and you wipe with the toilet paper, your hand will like speed past and kind of slip. Or sometimes you might be aware that there's a wet patch in your knickers and think, oh, maybe your period's starting, but then you check and it's damp for other reasons. So that wet patch in your knickers is the cervical fluid, and the cervical fluid is so important because it is what enables sperm to survive for up to 5 days. So No, your
Didn't know
face.
that. I'm learning
So
so
I
much.
can remember years ago, a friend of mine had sex with someone that she had been having sex with them, but then for one reason or another, they hadn't used their normal method of contraception that night. And she said to me, well, it's fine because it's only day 10. And I was like, do you want to have a kid or not? Because if you don't, then you need some emergency contraception. And she was like, but I'm not going to ovulate. I don't ovulate until day 14. I'm like, listen, you are in the prime window for conceiving right now. So cervical fluid changes consistency. It can be kind of thicker and more tacky, more opaque, like white looking. And then as estrogen increases and we get closer to ovulation, it turns into more of an egg white consistency. And when it's like that, so under a microscope, it produces this ferning pattern that creates channels for sperm to go through, and it also speeds their journey up. It also provides a route from the vagina through the cervix into the uterus and then for the sperm to find the egg. So it's magical stuff. Like, it is incredible. But, you know, we use the discharge word to describe it and like really put it down like it's this disgusting thing that the body does. And actually, it's the secret to life, or part of the secret to life. So first of all, knowing that your body does this and not shaming yourself for it or allowing others to shame your body for doing very normal things is really important. But especially if you're either trying to conceive or you're trying to avoid pregnancy, then that information is going to be really useful. And then post-ovulation, you know, the hormonal shift means that egg white quality goes away. And, you know, we've got a whole other picture in the second half of the cycle. But I actually put a picture up on my Instagram years ago of my cervical fluid. And I'm trying to think what happened. I think Instagram took it down, but it had like gone, like people were loving it and like the conversation was like massive, and then they took it down, and I think I spoke about them taking it down, and then the Huffington Post got wind of it and were like, we want to do an article. So they did an article about how, you know, it's a totally normal physiological thing, and it's, you know, it's literally like my fingers doing this and showing it. It's like no big deal. And then Instagram like put it back up because the Huffington Post were talking about it, and it was like it was this big thing. So
I really, as you've been talking, I've just been getting like kind of a warm and fuzzy feeling, because I really feel like there are going to be women and men listening to this who maybe have never had the opportunity to have these conversations, or maybe have felt so ashamed or embarrassed or uncomfortable to even go looking for this stuff through, no fault of their own. And that actually maybe there's probably a sense of relief that they're learning about this, and it's in a really safe and non-judgy environment. And I just love it.
Do you believe in sort of planning your training or things around your cycle? Or do you think it's more just about understanding it, knowing I'm going for training, but I know I'm premenstrual, so expectation lowered, hot water bottle on board, whatever it might, do you believe in that side of things? Is that what you're saying more about awareness?
Yeah, I think it depends on where you're at, because for me, when I had period pain that was excruciating, I couldn't leave the bed. It was a struggle to get to the bathroom. Like, riding a horse would never have come into it. So I think it just depends on where you are starting from with it. I think for me, I'm in a place, especially in terms of my mindset, how I can work with my stress responses, my experience of being autistic. Most of the time, I can just go to the yard, have a lesson, I can do stuff with my horse, and I can coach myself through it. But sometimes there's going to be those challenging days where I'm just like, you know what? I can't even bear to leave the house right now. And sometimes if I can get to the yard, that's actually going to support me. But sometimes the best thing I can do is get under a weighted blanket, make myself a hot chocolate, stick reruns of The West Wing or Grey's Anatomy on, and, take care of some admin on my laptop. And then I'm going to do that. But I think both are important, right? Doing what you can to support yourself in your training. For me, I will definitely, eye things up and think like, oh, like that fun ride, Rhiannon, that we both ended up doing. That was so fun to know that you were out there on the course as well. So for that, like, I knew where I was at my cycle for that. And I could think like, okay, maybe this is one where I'm going to opt out of doing the jumps, and I'm just going to enjoy being out in the wonderful Kent countryside with my friend and our horses, and isn't life fantastic? And just be okay with that. But then, if I'm ovulating, then I might be like, right, let's jump, let's go for it, and just, I think the message here is just being compassionate towards wherever you're at. And just thinking you're not the same on every day. So don't treat yourself like your horse isn't the same every day. Don't expect the same of them all the time. Like, we're not robots. And just like something that my instructor, Julia, is always saying is like, how can you set yourself up for success here? And sometimes that's going to be that's going to be staying home and not doing anything. Sometimes it's going to be taking ibuprofen. It might be going on the pill, right? All these things are appropriate in some situations. It can be coaching yourself. It can, there's so many variants there. But I think sometimes in equestrianism, we can push out, like there's this kind of culture of pushing ourselves and like putting on your brave pants and, and listen, I'm a mindset coach. I'm a big believer in working with your mindset. But when it's like this pushing and forcing and like dismissing what's actually going on for you, I don't think that's useful.
Yeah, I love it. I think the intuition, even if you don't know where you are in your cycle, I mean, obviously it's nice to know now, maybe you'll have more information. The intuition of being like, how am I going to tackle this day? My coach is always saying with the horses, make it fun, make it easy to understand, easy to achieve. And if it isn't those things, you start it from a different place, you change the perspective. And I think that's really smart. I know there are days when I go to the gym and I haven't really thought about where I am in my cycle, but suddenly the weights feel heavier and I'm like, oh, interesting. I'm just going to drop them. I'm going to do something else, or I'm drawn to something else. I went to the yard today and I was like, mentally my brain was being taken up with something else, and I'd planned to school, and actually I was like, oh, it's raining and I'm actually in a different space in my body, in my head. I'm just going to go for a hack instead. And I think that is just
letting yourself off the hook, like being okay with that fluctuation and accepting and understanding it, I think is enormous.
I think it makes a massive difference, just appreciating where you're at and going with that. And like my check-in moment for me is, you know, when I'm on a day, you know, where maybe I've got a bit less motivation and things, which by the way is also very common in that perimenopause transition, like less energy, symptoms that you're dealing with, but also like a decrease in motivation and maybe interest. And I see that quite a lot on like the Facebook groups and things where women going through that menopause transition are like, just horse it, like I just haven't got it in me to do horses anymore, and like I've lost interest or I've lost my motivation for it and things like that. And so, you know, that's a whole other thing. But for me, when I'm thinking about like, you know, like maybe my period's due, I'm a bit bloated and I kind of can't really be arsed and I just want to be on the sofa, then I just think, well, my check-in is if someone suddenly said like this band playing in London and I've got free tickets and like I've got you a hotel room for the night, like I'm taking care of you, let's go. Would I say yes, or would I be like, I'm really not up for it? And sometimes it doesn't matter who the band is, I'm actually really not up for it. I just need to be inside, out of the wind, taking care of myself. But on those times where I'm like, yeah, I would go, then I'm like, okay, leggings on, wellies, let's go.
I think we obviously have covered an enormous breadth of things, but you touched on something there about the perimenopause that I think having a lot of clients at that age is a really important thing. And I'd love maybe for us to go into more detail at a later date, Maisie, if you were open to it, about the perimenopause and the menopause, because again, understudied, overexperienced, I suppose is a good way of saying it. But you mentioned about kind of losing interest, and that is something that I think isn't maybe talked about enough, but where this dropping off of our hormones takes place when we hit perimenopause or start to become perimenopausal actually can affect our entire life in a quite dramatic way, is what I've spoken to people about. But maybe people don't know that that's what's happening, so then they think their life is all wrong, or they think that they need to quit their job and leave their partner and drive their car into the hedge. You know, can you touch on that? Can you talk about it about from a physiological point? Like what is our body trying to do, and how can we nurture it rather than fight it?
Yeah, so I like to think about hormones give us resilience, right? That's why when our hormone levels are high in the run up to ovulation, we often feel the most resilient. We have the most capacity for dealing with life's challenges. And, you know, when hormones are low in the cycle, that's when we often have less resilience for things. Things affect us more. We struggle to work through challenges that in another week's time, we would be like, whatever, I can deal with that. And really, that menopause transition is an exaggerated version of that. But usually we think about menopause transition as a decline in hormones, and it is eventually, but often actually hormone levels can be really high, or some hormone levels can be really high and others can be low, and we're just on a bit of a seesaw and there's a lack of balance between hormones, and so it can be really kind of swings and roundabouts for a while. So it can be like exaggerated cycle symptoms like breast tenderness or bloating, for example, or migraines. They just might, you know, be more intense or more frequent. But it can also be things like changes in mood, appearance of anxiety. Like I've never struggled with anxiety. Low mood, certainly when I was younger, and depression, yes. But now, like when my period's due, I'm like, it's doom and gloom. And I'm like, thankfully, I have the skills to coach myself through it and I can take care of myself. But if I didn't have those, I would for sure be going to the GP and like thinking maybe I needed some medication or something like that. And that's where often at this age, women are being prescribed antidepressants. And it's even for perimenopausal symptoms that are very clearly perimenopause. Miri, like you were saying earlier with the pill, it's like, well, once you're in your 40s, it's not the pill, it's antidepressants. Like, oh, you're having palpitations, take some antidepressants. Oh, you've got migraines, antidepressants, you know. So, and of course, those things can coexist at the same time. But once we start to go into the low hormone side of things, that's where we get joint issues, memory issues, certainly when it comes to riding, lots of knee pain, ankle pain, frozen shoulder. So, suddenly like the biomechanics of riding can start to feel very different. Coming down off your saddle and dismounting can feel very different. And then that's where we might start to get fears coming into riding. We're suddenly thinking, well, if I come off now, like, is my body going to recover? So then now we've got like the seeding in of a mindset issue. And so then we get that coming in. And then maybe there's stuff going on at home in terms of relationships, parenting stuff, and professionally as well. This is a phase when many of women will be made redundant or seek redundancy because of changes. The peak age for women, just to end on a highlight, but it's important for everyone to know, but the peak age in terms of suicide risk for women is 50 to 54. No coincidence, I think, that coincides with menopausal age and a drop off of hormones. So, we've got massive shifts happening in this phase of life. And thankfully we have these incredible creatures, our horses, that are often like the place where we can go and leave that behind, and we can just connect in the way that we want to with our horses and spend time with them. And wouldn't it be amazing if we could preserve that and continue that? But, if like suddenly you've got vaginal dryness and your labia is shrinking, or you're having significant issues that will come through in riding, or your hips are killing you, or you're just starting to deal with these issues, then maybe you're less inclined to ride, or the idea of mucking out on top of picking up the pile at the bottom of the stairs and all of these other, like, all of the unpaid labor and emotional labor that is expected of women. My dream is that we deal with these things at an earlier age and we figure them out, so that by the time we're entering perimenopause, we've addressed them in our relationships, we've addressed them with our kids, we are set up to deal with the perimenopause transition. That's, I feel like I am. And shout out to my boyfriend, who, when we were because we could always speak about it, and we're like, a lot of women at this age will lose their identity and want to spend time alone, and a lot of relationships and marriages deteriorate at this stage, and sometimes they really need to, but often it's other stuff that's coming in. And he was like, well, what do you think would be useful for you when if that starts to happen? And we were talking about it, and he was like, maybe that's the time when you should get a second horse. And I was like,
correct,
exactly, answer. That sounds like a great plan.
Green flag.
Great answer.
Exactly. So, but it's really important to know that there's lots of things that can be done, right? There's hormonal support, there's, mindset coaching. I know you've had people on recently, especially talking about that. There's my book, Perimenopause Power. But again, it's that sometimes we're battling that thing of dismissing our experiences, thinking, I can't remember anything. Well, that's just getting older, isn't it? Or, I've got this happening, really heavy periods all of a sudden. Oh, well, that's just what happens now, isn't it? I'll probably just have to have it all whipped out at some point. And, suddenly that's what the reality we're in. So I think it's just the importance of seeking out early intervention in the same way that we would treat our horses. If they've got something going on, right? Who do we get out? Who has the knowledge? Who can help with stuff? Like, are we treating ourselves with that same level of respect and compassion?
Gosh, Maisie, I think, this is going to be so beneficial for so many people, because shedding light on these things, we've covered a really big breadth, practically puberty to menopause. And I don't think this is talked about. This is going to be the first conversation I will have been party to that has covered so much, truthfully, openly, in this depth, with such transparency. I have a closing tradition, and I can't wait to hear your answer. I hope you've listened to another episode so you know what to say, well, you maybe thought about what you're going to say, but if you need a moment, please take it.
Maisie's face has lit up, so I feel like she is ready.
If you had one thing that you could say to every equestrian, what would you say?
listen to yourself and listen to your horse.
There you go. And I think we've covered the breadth of how to do that in this episode, and that's really lovely. Thank you so much. I feel so honoured.
Yeah, well, you're very welcome. I mean, we had plenty. I knew we were going to cover a lot, but we have really covered a lot. So it's been great to be on. And yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Maisie, if people would like to connect with you, I know obviously we've mentioned your books, but you also are present now with in lots of places on social, in your podcast, etc. So tell us a little bit about where people can connect with you.
So the Maisie Hill Experience podcast has now over 250 episodes waiting for you to dive into. And there's actually a couple of specific episodes about horse riding and recovering from confidence knocks and things, where I've shared like how I have coached myself as a really good life coach to recover from accidents and injuries and like coming back to it. Because I remember my instructor being like, I have never seen someone come back from an incident as quickly, like mentally, as you have. And I was like, I should bloody hope so. Like at the level that I coach at, I should hope so.
Well, we will definitely, we can add those in the show notes, definitely.
That would be great. I will give you the link for them because, yeah, it just made me like unpack why am I so able to mentally recover from something so quickly, and like how can I help other people with that. But I cover all sorts on the podcast, so I would say go get involved with that. And then on Instagram, I'm _MaisieHill_, and my website is maisiehill.com. There's all sorts of free goodies and I send out great emails and things there. So lots of places to check in.
But thank you so much, Maisie. And thank you so much, everybody, for listening. And we will see you next week. Goodbye for now.
See you next week. Bye.